For our live showcase today, we have Dale Furtwengler of Teaching Confidence. He's going to talk about the source of complexity. Dale's friends tell him that they have a difficult time introducing him because there's so much that he's done over the years. He's not sure whether they're saying he's old or he suffers from ADHD. One thing has transcended all his efforts. He's been an avid student of human behavior, which has led to today's program, The Source of Complexity. Today, Dale leads us through the exploration of the complexity in our lives and what its source is, with the goal of enabling us to deal more effectively with complexity as it arises. He tried to put that word in there as many times as possible for me. Please welcome Dale.
And you did very well. So, all right. So we're going to talk about the sources of complexity. And when the idea for this program came up, the second thought that came to mind was a Pogo quote. And I don't know whether all of you are old enough to remember Pogo, but it was a cartoon character. And the quote is, "We have met the enemy and he is us." And knowing how introspective this audience is, I doubt that anybody would argue that premise. But it really doesn't answer the question, how do we add complexity to our lives? So let's take a look at some of the ways that we do that. One is the fast-paced world. All right, we all feel like we live in a very fast-paced world. The technological changes are happening so fast, it's almost impossible to keep up. But the real question we should be asking is, who's setting the pace? Are we allowing the technology and the advances in that technology to set the pace? Or are we deciding which aspects of technology we want to use because it either enhances the value we provide or accelerates the delivery of that value? It's a choice that we have the ability to make, and we need to choose wisely. The second thing is setting boundaries. Recently, one of my eldest nephew decided that he wants to consider a career in consulting. And he sat down with my wife and I because one of his big concerns was what it would do to his family life. He wanted to make sure that if he embarked on this, that he wasn't going to infringe on the time with his wife and his daughters. And when he asked my wife how she felt about it when I went into business, she said, well, Dale set boundaries. He told clients and prospects he wasn't going to work on the weekend. Not that he didn't ever, but it was very, very rare. He also made sure that we took extended weekends throughout the year so that we had time for ourselves. So we set the boundaries. Now, one of the challenges for the people in this audience in particular is how much you care about other people and how passionate you are about helping others. And sometimes that leads us to make choices in the benefit of others at the expense of ourselves. So again, we want to be careful about the choices we make here. Another way is that we don't understand time. We misjudge time. So let me share a scenario with you. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You just completed the task. You look, you committed to your family. You're going to leave at 5 and join them. You look at the next item on the list and you realize you can't complete it within the hour that you have left. So you scroll down the list, you find another task that you think you can accomplish, and you start it. Now, I'd like to see a show of hands, please. How many of you are working on that project the next day? Right, everybody here. We've all done it, right? So one of the things that Einstein had said about time was that it was relative. And he's completely accurate because the tasks that we don't enjoy seem like they drag on forever. And the ones we do, time seems to fly by. But we know the reality is much different. So the question here is, the choice that we have here is, are we going to continue that delusion? or now that we're aware that how easily we can be deluded by time and our interest in doing things, and are we going to make better decisions, or are we going to go ahead and work the next item on the task because that's the one that we consciously decided earlier was going to provide the greatest benefit to us and move us along to our goal more quickly? Another one is the savior complex. Again, with this group in particular, you care a lot about people. You want to help them. You want to see them to get the results they want, to have the life that they want. But when you care more than the person you're trying to help, it's a waste of time and energy. And so, again, we have to make the determination about whether or not we care more than the person that we're trying to help. And if we do, we need to extract ourselves from that situation. Another way is nurturing emotions. It's a natural human tendency and one that does not serve us well. But we tend to nurture the emotions that we have, especially true in doubts and fears and anxiety. We seem to relive them again and again and again until we finally exhaust ourselves emotionally. And at that point, the emotion wanes and we begin to see solutions to whatever the challenges that we're facing. And it's true for relation as well. We can get so caught up in how well things are going that we quit paying attention to some of the elements that are helping things be so good. And in doing so, we create problems for ourselves. And then we're back into the other set of emotions, right? So again, we need to choose to be careful in how we deal with the emotions that we experience. Trying harder. How many of us haven't at one time or another tried harder when we just weren't getting the solution we wanted? We were getting frustrated, but we kept trying, we kept pushing. We weren't feeling well. Whatever the case might be, we kept pushing harder. And yet, experience has taught us repeatedly that in those instances, if we walk away and we get refreshed or we start feeling better, we can actually make progress much more quickly. And we end up being healthier in the prospect. So again, we need to learn to choose not to press harder in situations like these. And here we're talking about self-limiting attitude. A lot of energy gets lost over us thinking about the things that we wish we'd have done, that we wish we had pursued, that we wish we'd have tried. And often the reason we didn't is because we didn't feel like we had the background or experience or the talent in order to be able to do it. When in reality, it's a combination of the passion that we have for what we want to pursue and our ability to learn and adapt that assures our success in whatever we choose to do. So again, realizing that foregoing something we want because we don't have the background or experience or the talent that we feel is necessary, and realizing that our passion and our ability to learn and adapt assures our success. Then the failing to delegate. And I'm sure, again, I know I've been guilty of this. I'm sure all of you have as well. We fail to delegate. And some of the reasons that we do is because we want things done a certain way. Nobody does it quite as well as I do. And in doing so, we again limit our potential when we could just as easily hire somebody who can do that and enjoys it and will do it much more quickly and more successfully than we can, while we devote our time and energy to the things that we know can accelerate the progress toward our goal. And by failing to delegate, we just add complexity to our lives. And then confrontation, avoiding confrontation. Most of us do not like confrontation. And yet the problem with that is that when we do, we encourage the behaviors that we don't want. And if we continue to avoid the confrontation, ultimately we become more and more angry and frustrated with what's happening until we get to the point where we actually explode and potentially damage a relationship that we previously valued. And the thing is, we don't need to be confrontational. We don't need to confront. All we need to do is question. Instead of disagreeing with someone, ask, well, what would happen if? How would that work in this situation? The how question again, Tom. How would it work in this situation? Is it true that? You know, and by getting asking the questions, we get people to evaluate or rethink their position or what they're doing, which enables them then to reach a conclusion that may be more in line with what you feel is more appropriate behavior on their part. But the more quickly you do that, the less likelihood that you're going to lose a very valuable relationship in the process. And life gets simpler when you do that. Now, with these examples, I've tried to give you a sense for what the real source of complexity is. And just in case I wasn't very effective at that, the real key is choice. The complexity we experience in life depends upon the choices that we make. So think of complexity as a spectrum. And it ranges from very complex to very simple. What determines where you fit on that spectrum, the complexity that you experience in your life, depends on the choices you make. The more frequently that those choices are made subconsciously in an emotional time, the greater the complexity of your life. And the more frequently you make decisions based on logic, make a conscious decision based on objective analysis, the simpler life becomes. Because two things happen when you allow yourself to take that more measured approach. And one is that the emotions wane. And the way we accomplish that is very simple to get across that line, and that is a pause. When we're in an emotional state, all we have to do is pause. And those two things that happen is, one, the emotion wanes, and two, we begin to see more options available to us than we ever thought possible. And it makes for easier choices and more effective choices. So if you want to reduce the complexity in your life, when you're in an emotional state, choose to pause and then make a conscious, well-reasoned choice after that. If you'd like more tips on how to remove complexity from your life, I'd like to recommend my book, Simplifying Life. And with that, I'll turn it over for questions or comments. Karen?
On your list of things that get in the way, you didn't read the third one that you have, and that's mine. It's easier to do it myself than to, and then you keep doing it yourself.
Right.
But that's mine. It's just like, I can get it done right now.
Yeah, and I did, during a program that I did some years ago, that issue came up. And I said to the person who raised that objection, said, well, it's just easier to tell them what I want, and rather than I said, really? And I asked her two questions. and she came to the conclusion that she could do it based on those 2 questions. So, it takes a lot less time if you ask the question to let the people reach the conclusion on their own, because when they reach that conclusion on their own, they validated it with their own experience. So they're more willing to do it, they act on it more quickly. So you get the result a lot more quickly and you don't have to do the work. Okay, any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much.